like what's some of the craziest like legal exchanges you've had to deal with as a lawyer when it comes to marriage? Like what's the most, either the funniest or the most outrageous disputes that you've ever had to encounter?
The worst one, and it wasn't funny, but it was filled with so much juicy gossip.
Okay.
It was a few years ago, and I had a client who was married, and her husband had an ex-wife. There was a custody battle going on between her husband and his ex-wife.
Okay.
They had hired a lawyer, the husband and wife,
okay,
to handle that custody battle.
Okay.
The husband then began cheating on his current wife with his lawyer that he had hired for his custody battle.
What? Welcome to the Introspect Club, a club where you can learn a lot about yourself through conversations with other people. My name is Damisse, and I am your host. We have a special treat for you today. Today we're going to be talking about marriage. Yep, the big M word. The thing that, I don't know, a lot of people have been dreaming about since the beginning of their existence. The thing that their Pinterest is lined up with. I mean, mainly women. I don't know if men are really lined up in their Pinterest with wedding stuff, but that's just me. There's a lot of controversy in today's time when it comes to marriage, especially with the rising rate of divorce, as well as the statistics around how often and how soon people are now getting married. Those things are changing. Like people's ideas about what union is always something that's being shifted in our society. And who better than to kind of explain what's really going on in today's environment when it comes to love and marriage than a divorce lawyer. So I'm very, very honored to bring to you guys today a very, very special guest, the one and only breakup lawyer, Brittany M. Dixon. Welcome, Brittany. How you doing? She's like, hey. This is not Ellen DeGeneres, all right? Don't get it twisted. All right, you're not Obama where you get to dance on stage and do your thing. How you doing, love? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Not bad. Living a dream. Just out here getting ready to have this conversation with you because we've had quite a few conversations about this, and you're an incredible person in the sense of like you have quite the experience that a lot of people don't get a chance to have, which is be in the room with every relationship that ended.
Poorly.
Poorly. If you're part of the conversation, then it ended poorly in some way, shape, or form. I'd like you to give a brief introduction to yourself, just an elevator pitch, so everybody kind of understands exactly who you are, what you're about, before we get this conversation started. Talk to us.
Of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany M. Dixon. I am the breakup lawyer, Atlanta's favorite divorce attorney. I am the owner of the Litigation Corner LLC, and my expertise is all things family law, but especially divorces and custody matters.
Right on. So you've seen a lot of breakups, right?
Yeah.
You've seen a lot of angry people in your office, right?
Yes. And hurt people. They're always angry. Some of them are sad.
I mean, basically they have very like negative feelings towards the end of their relationship, right? Yeah. So my question to you is, what are people really thinking about when they're getting married that they often don't think about if they're getting divorced? Like, what are some things that people overlook especially when it comes to like laws that they're not even really fully aware of. Because I feel as though a lot of people who are getting divorced, because I have some friends, one in particular, who got divorced, and there are certain things that were brought to their attention that they didn't even know was a thing in marriage. What are some of those things so people can kind of get an idea of what they're getting into?
I think that I have this conversation a lot, and people are always angry when I say it, but I think the biggest misconception is what marriage actually is, right? So marriage is a legal contract that binds people together.
Okay.
That's what it actually is, especially here in the United States. That's what it is. It's a legal contract that says legally, I'm responsible for you. You're responsible for me. I can make decisions on your behalf. You can make decisions on my behalf. We're financially bound together, right?
Okay.
But because, marriage often has a religious or what's the word to use? People think that marriage is about your spiritual bond, right? And it is, right? It can be, right? Depending on who's getting married. But I think that, when people get married, they get married based on that first, without understanding that this is a legal contract, right? You're bound to one another.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that until it's time for a divorce, right? So, hey, I got married, we bought a house together, but my name is on the house.
Yeah.
And, his name isn't on the house, or her name isn't on the house. And my question is always, well, when did you buy it? Was it before you were married or after you were married? After. But I put the down payment and I'm on the mortgage and she's never paid anything or he's never paid anything and it's my house.
Yeah,
well, it was bought during the marriage, right? Yeah. So it's a marital asset and it's both of your houses. What do you mean? You know what I mean?
They
and
get shocked. They're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
This is the whole thing? Like that's crazy, because my friend who had gotten married, like when you sign a marriage certificate, right, or a marriage license or whatever, it's like a sheet of paper, pretty much, right? But when you're getting divorced, it's a Bible. It
is.
So to me, I feel like that's a big bait and switch for people who are getting in these relationships, because it's not like a driver's license like you just toss in the garbage when you're tired of driving a car. You know what I mean? So with marriage licenses, you sign an agreement to do something where the terms aren't discussed fully until you're wanting to end it, which is kind of crazy and backwards to me.
It is.
Why is it like that?
Because like I just said, people don't understand that a marriage contract is just that. It's a legally binding contract, just like anything else, right? And depending on how you negotiate the terms at the time of or before marriage, then you can either come out better or you can come out worse at the time of divorce. God forbid, you're not going into it for divorce. But because we put such a huge emphasis on the spiritual connection that you're supposed to have in a marriage, we don't think about the contractual agreement that two people are, making with one another. And I think that causes what you're saying, right? We got married because we were in love and I just love him and I love her and I want to spend the rest of my life together. Okay, cool.
Do that. The thing is, like, I've always thought about, like, where did the idea of marriage come from? Because I know, like, union is not necessarily a new thing. And marriage in today's environment, meaning within the last, like, century, is not always what it's been throughout the course of human history, right? Some of the studies that I've made show that the entry to marriage in civilized, environments really came from like agriculture, right? This is going to sound crazy, right? So I looked this up. Usually, I don't want to say usually, but prior to like civilized or industrial people, we were nomads, like just traveling through the wilderness, trying to survive as a group. People were procreating with each other in large groups and masses in order to like grow the population of their tribe in order to survive against like famine, predators, weather, so on and so forth, right? And all kinds of nature obstacles. But then what happened was when we started to understand how to manipulate nature, aka agriculture, grow your own crops, irrigate the land, things like that, you didn't have to chase things anymore, right? So then men in particular who knew how to do these things like start fires and so on and so forth, they wanted to control paternity because there was no such thing as paternity. And apparently their only way of controlling paternity and being able to focus their efforts on their personal offsprings and not the offsprings of a miscellaneous man is to put contracts out on wombs and women. So that way they can say, okay, this person is pure, they're a virgin. I'm going to trade a goat for this woman and I'm going to breed children so they can help with the crops to continue to, like, it was like an industry, right? And it was accepted because unfortunately for women, they didn't have the access to wealth and, any kind of assets that will give them any type of financial benefit. So the only way to find any security is to be purchased by a family to raise children and so on and so forth. And then it just eventually evolved to where we're at right now, which is not so much that, but at the same time, it stemmed from that in a lot of ways. Do you recognize any of that in like people's psyche a little bit, or is that just something that's kind of overlooked?
You mean today?
Yeah, today, because like, are you seeing a lot more like still traditional, like I'm a woman, I want to be taken care of, so I'm going to get married to. Yeah, even with the progressive nature of our environment. Why do you think that is?
Because I think that the gender roles between men and women is still very much instilled within us, right? So, I encountered a couple at one point that I was having a conversation with a married couple, and a guy was saying, I remember the time when it was legal to beat your wife.
Wait, why is he bringing that up?
Exactly. My point. Why was he bringing that up, right? And his wife is sitting there, and I'm like,
and she was like, "Yes, ma'am, yes."
What do you think about that, right? How do you feel about when it was legal to beat your wife? Are you wishing that it was still legal?
She probably was like,
"It was." Like, I was like, why did you bring that up? But yeah, I do think that you definitely see it. You see it more now, right? And I understand the mindset, right? Because there's still a huge wage gap between men and women, just being honest, right? So unfortunately, women can be just as educated as they want, have years of experience, but a man, because he's a man, can still walk in the door and start out making more money than she is simply because he's a man. So no matter how progressive we are becoming, it's still very much a man's world. So I think that because of that, the ideology is still going to be the same within marriage. People are going to think that, well, you're a man. So because you're a man and I'm a woman, I need you to take care of certain things. And just like men are the same way, because you're a woman, you should be doing certain things, right? And I think that we're going to continue to evolve as a society and a culture, but I think that that's still going to be a huge thing that we deal with. Patriarchy.
You know what's crazy? You mentioned the wage gap, right? Mm-hmm. And there's been numerous conversations about the wage gap. People have so many different opinions about how to interpret the statistics and so on and so forth. Like, I looked into it just for my own education and understanding, so I don't sound super ignorant when I talk about it. Like, there's a lot of causes for the wage gap. There is a wage gap for sure, but the cause is not purely because you're a woman and because you're a man. It's not fully tied to that, right? I looked into it, and what happens is oftentimes when you look at statistics, they take an aggregate of a group of people, right? Women, and then an aggregate of another group, men, and then they total up and average out their incomes and say, hey, you guys are making more, so on and so forth. But they're not taking into account decisions being made in each individual group, right? For instance, a woman and a man, there's certain jobs and careers that certain people will either be more drawn to, right, than the other. Like, there are a lot of high paying jobs that for some reason, there's not enough women entering into them. Like, the most lucrative fields statistically is STEM, right? Science, tech, engineering, and math, right? And there's a lot of programs inviting women to take on these courses, right? And enter into college. But then there are a lot of men who are entering those in droves, right? But then the fields that women are really drawn to are the social ones, right? In schools, and those don't pay that much, and it's not because they're women. It's just it's not something that is what's the word I'm looking for? Where you can find, where it's hard to find people to do those jobs in terms of like teachers and so on and so forth. There's like an abundance of teachers. As far as quality teachers, that's debatable, but like it's not hard to find someone who's a teacher looking to be a teacher versus someone who is like really technical, someone that's like in science and so on and so forth that requires a lot of sacrifice that only a small amount of people are going to do. So they pay more for it because it's rare, right? There are some fields where women dominate that do make money, which is like nursing and so on and so forth, right? But they don't really overpower the population of men who are taking on these other roles, like especially like in construction, engineering, tech, all that stuff. Very dangerous jobs that pay a lot of money because of the risk. So that's a factor. So I don't want to get too much into the wage gap, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is if there's this concept of, okay, women don't make as much, right? Why do women want to enter into relationships where, huh?
Say it again.
Why do women want to enter into relationships where they're being taken care of? Because that's further reinforcing the idea that the man needs to make the money.
Well, I think that, one, we need to take a step back, right? You said that women enter into more social fields than men do. Men do all the dangerous jobs or the jobs that require a lot of, I guess, like STEM and tech and stuff like that, right?
Correct.
That requires a lot of schooling and things like that.
Correct.
But when I talk about the ideology, right, that starts at home.
Sure.
Living in a patriarchal society, the differences between men and women from little adolescents, right? Babies were taught women are nurturers and men are not.
Sure.
Men go out and do these things and do those other things. So when you have children who are growing up and going through schooling and they're being taught and they're seeing, oh, I should go be a nurse because I'm taking care of people. I should go be a teacher because I'm teaching children. Right. I should go and do these things because women are taught to be nurturers, right? We're taught to take care. So in my opinion, it makes sense that there aren't going to be as many women in tech. There aren't going to be as many women in STEM. There aren't going to be as many women in those fields because women are taught from babies to be a nurturer. You are here to take care of and teach and be loving and kind and social. While men, on the other hand, are not. They're pushed to go out and use skill and develop skill and intellect, right? Because that's what will make you more money. So you can take care of the nurturers and this and that, right? But I think what you're not taking into account with the wage gap is that even men who come into those fields that women dominate, like nursing and teaching and the like, still make more money. That's not
necessarily true. I've actually looked that up. I've actually looked that up. So there are certain fields, especially in the, healthcare and so on and so forth, where a woman with the same qualifications as a man will make the same, oftentimes more, right? For a lot of reasons, because of the stereotype that a woman is a better caretaker. It's just, that's just how those statistics played out, at least the ones that I saw. But I do agree with you to a certain degree when it comes to like raising children. For some reason, like sometimes I see kids, like I see little girls like walking with their parents and the little kid's got a stroller. I'm like, why do you have a stroller? Like, you're 4 years old. Did you choose to have that stroller? Are the toys like geared around you being a caretaker? Like all the kitchen toys are like all in pink and stuff like that. And I agree with you. When I see that, I'm like, that's dumb. Or why do the boys always want to have guns? Like
in trucks.
Huh?
In trucks.
Sure. I mean, I'm seeing more like unisex toys that are geared around stuff like that. Like I think there's a progressive push in that, and I do agree that there is like this cultural expectation for men and women, but it's often based on they're pushing what they're used to, and it's hard to tell a mother who grew up in the 1920s or 1950s to teach their daughter something that they themselves don't even know, right? So I think it's a progressive thing. So you do have a point, but I just do think that there's there's a large volume of influence that's causing that. But let's talk about marriage though, because as progressive as we want to be, marriage in itself is a vehicle that has existed prior to the progressive ideas that we have today. So right now you consider marriage a business, right?
I don't consider it that, but that's what it actually is. A marriage license in the United States is actually
in your field, you have to look at it as a business. You have to look at it as a contract. You're not a marriage counselor, right? You might like aid people in consoling them in some way, shape, or form, but that's not like your duty. So what are some things that you feel like people should be doing before they get married, or if they should get married at all, if their situation doesn't really benefit from it? Like, how do you really promote marriage yourself? How do you value it?
So how do I value marriage, or what do I think people should do before they get married?
I think a combination of both, because I think you've seen a lot of breakups, right? You've seen a lot of horrible things happening between couples. That has to play a role in your psyche as to what comes out of marriage if you're constantly seeing the endings of relationships.
No, it doesn't. Not for me in particular. I think marriage is great. I think it's dope, right? I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to find someone that you bond with, right? And that you want to be spiritually, emotionally, financially connected to for the rest of your life. That's a huge level of commitment.
Yeah.
And I think that to have the ability to commit to that and the wherewithal to be dedicated to that continuous commitment, right? Because the commitment isn't just in the beginning, it's in the middle, it's all throughout the marriage. We have to wake up every day and choose to be with that person.
Okay.
And I think that's dope. And I think people that can do that successfully, I think it can be the greatest thing that a person ever does, because it really does test you as an individual, and it tests your ability to be empathetic and vulnerable with someone else. And I think that marriage with the right people and the right tools can be a beautiful thing.
You sound like a whole politician right now.
No, but I'm serious now, because the issue I've found is that the people who come and sit in front of me think that marriage would have fixed problems, right?
Yeah.
8 years, and it was all these red flags. I know right now on Twitter people are going crazy with the red flags, right? So I need to do a thread about marriage red flags. But there are a bunch of red flags that are there before the marriage occurs.
Okay. What are some?
I mean, somebody don't have the tools, right? Somebody don't have the tools. And if we didn't do the work before we got married to develop this tool and the skill to make a lifelong commitment, why did you do that? So
you're saying, like, and I do agree with you. A lot of people feel like marriage is the thing that's going to bond them and fix whatever relationship problems they've had and to carry them into the next stage of their relationship. Like, they need that in order for the relationship to survive. But you're saying that, there's enough clues and red flags that will indicate that with or without marriage, you guys aren't going to be compatible to be together anyway. So because you've seen like so many breakups, what are some red flags that you feel often come up at the end of people's relationships that are potentially very visible at the beginning?
Selfishness is the biggest one.
Okay.
And fear of commitment.
You see that coming to fruition towards the end of a relationship, and how do you know how much of that existed at the beginning? They tell you, or you
tell me. I'll say, well, how long have you been married? Oh, we've been married for 10 years. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, one of my questions I asked my client was, what was your relationship like before you were married? Okay. That's the first thing I asked them. Oh, it was good, and I'm like,
they start speaking in that high-pitched voice. My mama wanted me to be married. I already bought the dress before I met him. Exactly. Like, damn.
Right. So I always ask that, what kind of relationship did you have before you got married? And they'll say, oh, everything was good. There were some issues. Okay, well, tell me about that. Oh, he kind of would he was a little inconsiderate, or he was a little this. He didn't really want me to be involved in this. He didn't want me to know these things. But we got married anyway. And then I'm like, why? Why? Why did you do that? Oh, well, because we have been dating for 10 years and, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'll say, hey, especially my couples that were married, that were together for a long period of time before they got married, I'll usually say, what took you so long to get married? I don't really know. He would say things like, it's just a piece of paper and, it really didn't mean anything. And that to me is a signal of there's a fear of commitment there, right? Because for a lot of people without the marriage license or certificate, people feel like a relationship is disposable, even with children, right? I can still walk away from that. I'm not going to lose out on as much because I'm not married.
Yeah, but I'm confused about that statement because you're saying that people who say that it's just a piece of paper are more like prone to walk away and the relationship is more disposable to them. But I tend to wonder, right? I tend to wonder how true that is if 50%, around 50% still marriages end in divorce. Even though I still kind of question how that statistic is really put together. I'm still working on that. But right now the statistic is 50% of marriages, approximately, give or take, end in divorce. So even if you get married, people are still tossing, their relationships are being disposable, right? And then the cliche is that the man is the one that has commitment issues, but yet out of the marriages that are ending in divorce, 70% of them approximately are being filed by women. So to me, it's just counterintuitive to consider if somebody says, okay, this thing's a piece of paper, and they look at that person as, oh, that person has commitment issues, but then the people who are marriages themselves from the outside looks like they have commitment issues. So how do we bridge the gap? I don't understand that.
So in my opinion, if a man is in a long-term relationship, and I'm talking 5+ years with no mention of marriage, that's a red flag that he has a commitment issue, right? If he's willing to be with you without a piece of paper, but he's scared of that piece of paper, it's because he deems that piece of paper as something that legally ties him to you. And men feel responsible for women because y'all have been bred to think that you are responsible for your family.
Are we not?
You are. And y'all have been bred to think the same, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying to you is when a man is willing to spend 5+ years with someone with no mention of marriage, that is a red flag that there's a commitment issue that a woman should have been taking heed to, right?
Okay.
But then when we get in the relationship, she gets married anyway, either because she's pressured him to or because he finally said, okay, I'll marry you. She thinks that commitment issue is going to just be gone. Or she thinks that those red flags were just gone, and they're not. And then when she realizes that the marriage it didn't fix anything. It may have put a Band-Aid on something for a minute, but the wound is still there because y'all haven't fixed anything. Then she gets fed up and now she's like, oh, well, I want out because we got married. And I thought because we got married, everything was going to be okay. That's not true.
As a woman in marital law, especially divorce law, and considering how many of these men have commitment issues, right? And I go like this because I'm still debating. And
I'm not saying commitment issues are exclusive to men.
I feel you.
Everyone has a level of commitment issue.
I feel you, but the conversation seems to be, around men's commitment issues because it seems to be the consensus that's usually where it stems from, right? So my question to you: Do you feel like there's equal benefit for men in the legal aspects of marriage, given that you're stating that men are trained or conditioned to take care of the woman? Do you feel like there's like equal benefit legally to the man who is in that position of taking care of said woman?
You mean once the marriage is dissolved?
I'm saying what, like, inside the marriage, and if it dissolves? Do you feel like there's?
I think men benefit most from being married.
Are you talking about legally or relationship?
Telling you. So I think men benefit most socially from being married.
Not worried about that.
Women, once a marriage is dissolving, benefit most legally from it. But that's also because of the wage gap between men and women. That's where that comes into play, right? Because if the man is the higher earner in the marriage, the woman will benefit more depending on the length of the marriage. If the woman, however, is the higher earner in a marriage, then the roles can kind of be reversed. But yes, that's my answer. Men benefit more socially. Women can benefit more financially.
What are the social benefits for a man being married?
Oh, goodness. Where do I start? Men are taken more seriously when they're married, especially men in business. So if you have a man, let's say, that's trying to climb the corporate ladder or pierce the veil, right? I know personally men who get passed up, right? Especially once you reach a certain age. If you don't have a wife or children or show some sort of sign of stability, then it's harder for you than men that are actually married, because in this type of society, a man who can lead a household and take care of other people is seen as stable, and you're going to be more trusted, right, by other people to give you responsibility.
So if a man has a woman that he calls his own, has children, bought a house, takes care of them, but is not married, is he not up for that promotion if he's showing long-term?
He can definitely be up for it, but I think hold on. If you have a man who's married with the same qualifications, the man who's married is going to get it.
I gotta see the statistics on that. I've heard people say that as well as people like other things. I've heard people say that have been debunked through statistics, but this one in particular, I feel like it's a common thing that is discussed, and I don't know. I think a lot of men are reading into the legal aspects of marriage, and they're not really concerned much about the social aspects, right? Excuse me?
They should be.
I hear you, but at the same time, at the same time, regardless of how much social benefit there might be for a man to walk around with the wedding ring on in order to get these promotions, to be like, oh, he's a responsible person, so on and so forth. I think a lot of men are scared of the typical outcomes that they see from, their parents, their peers, as well as just people in society as a whole. I mean, you're in the business of pretty much making money from these breakups, and you probably wouldn't be as successful if people were in, typically happy relationships, right? But there's so many of them that there's an entire industry on breakups. So when a man sees that, he's looking at it like, okay, if I'm likely to be the person to be hurt the most in this, especially if I'm in a relationship where traditionally I'm taking care of the woman, but the punishment is going to come to me if our relationship doesn't work out, and the woman is likely to be the person to end the relationship, given the statistics, isn't there like some kind of justification for the fear for men, or no?
In my opinion, no, because like I said, I think that this is where we're. I don't know why.
I'm shocked.
Because I think for me, right, people you got to differentiate between what you want. Do you want companionship or do you want marriage, right? And I think a lot of people don't know what they want because the two are conflated.
The two what?
If a man, the two, companionship, relationship, and marriage, right? You can have companionship and relationship within your marriage, but you don't have to have a marriage to have companionship and relationship, right? Okay. So you need to figure out as a person, both men and women, what you actually want. If a man decides, I want to be able to take care of this person, have children with this person, and ensure that these children are financially taken care of, then marriage is the thing for you, right? Because that's what safeguards your unit. If a stable relationship is all you want, then you need to go to therapy and figure out what you got going on and all your childhood wounds and fix all that so you can have a stable, happy, and committed relationship. And you don't have to be married to have that.
See, that gets a little tricky in my mind because so making sure the children are taken care of, I think that kind of gets taken care of through like child support and so on and so forth. Not that I agree that a person should.
Not in the state of Georgia. Just because you pay child support does not mean that your children will legally inherit from you. That's an issue with unwed fathers here. You have to
really? Talk to me about that, because I need to know about that, because maybe that's the gap that I'm not understanding.
Yeah, you have to go through a completely different process here in the state of Georgia when you have a child that's not born of a marriage, right? So it's called legitimation, and I do them all the time. And for my dads that are out here who are not marrying women, you don't have any legal right to that child before you go for it.
Of course. So my question is, if I have kids in Georgia, right? And this is just for I'm just trying to polish up my ignorance here. If I have kids in Georgia, right, and I have a certain amount of wealth, right, and if I'm not married to the woman that has my kids, right, but she has my kids, like paternity shows my kids, my name's on the birth certificate and so on and so forth, who gets rights to my wealth if I die?
Not your children, because they're not legally your children.
Even though I signed the birth certificate?
No, that doesn't mean anything.
So let me ask you this question. In
the state of Georgia, that doesn't mean anything.
I feel you. Let's focus on the state of Georgia. We can talk about everywhere else later, but because I'm fascinated, because every time I speak to you and somebody else, I learn something new and my brain just goes, poof, right? So if you are not married to said woman and you have children with her and your name is on birth certificates, paternity test has already shown that you're the father, those kids don't get your wealth, right? But if that means you don't have any legal obligation to the kids, right? Or legal,
You don't have any legal obligation to a child until you either petition the court for it or until the mom puts you on child support.
So that's the part I want to.
But the financial obligation is not the same as inheriting, right? So you can have to pay me child support every month, but that still does not mean my child can inherit from you. That just means you have to financially.
Crazy to me. That doesn't even make sense to me. If the court can legally allow someone to draw money from you every month because you signed the birth certificate or there's paternity that shows that you're the father, so on and so forth, they can legally have access to your money for that, which rightfully so. You got to take care of the kids. I'm not arguing that. I'm not saying like men should definitely, if you're not going to be in the kid's life and you have any means to take care of your kids, you should be responsible financially for those kids. In the same right, I feel as though if you die under those same conditions, those kids should still have access to your money if you die. Because then that's not the law taking care of the kids anymore, right? Because if I died...
Well, no, it's not the law taking care of the kids. It's you not taking care of your kids, right? Because the way that the courts look at it is you didn't marry the mom, which you should have, and you didn't. And you also didn't follow legitimation, which you should have, and you didn't. So the children are your responsibility.
Sure. If they're my responsibility, right?
If you are going to have children, the courts would like for them to be born of a marriage so that you are automatically legally responsible for the children, right? But if you didn't do that, you have to do the work to then go to the court and say, these are my kids. I would like some sort of legal right to them. I want them to be able to inherit from me. I would like to have some sort of custody of them. I would like to have a whole host of other things that the legitimation process can give them. If you don't petition the court, though.
Yeah, but see, again, I don't mean to like revisit this because I feel like we're going in circles, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. If you're not married and you're not, and the kids are, on paper yours or paternity wise, they're yours. The court has systems in place to make sure a woman can collect child support and money to take care of the kids, right?
Yes.
Under those same conditions, if the guy dies, the court does not have systems in place to automatically reward the woman and the children. So that, to me, there's a gap there.
There's a whole process, right? So you're going to have to go through a whole thing and trying to petition the court to show that he was the dad, but he wasn't the legal dad. It's a
so
whole
the kids get no money if I die.
No,
That's
essentially no.
crazy.
Mom would have to go. Mom would have to go to the estate and try and fight for it, right? And then if the estate pushes back, it's a whole thing. That's why the courts say either you marry her, sir, or you get the legitimation done. One of the two. It's your responsibility to do it.
So this is Georgia, right? What percentage of the United States is like this?
There is a form of the legitimation process in each state. It's not always as formal as Georgia. In some states, you can just sign the birth certificate and the what else is it? An acknowledgement of paternity. So in some states, you can do that, right? But there are states that are like Georgia and have a legitimation process. I don't know the exact number on it.
That's kind of wild. That just further reinforces, like, I feel like the laws need some massaging because it just doesn't really have a clear path to having mutual benefit on all fronts. And I feel like a lot of people don't know these things, and there's a lot of assumptions being made, but I don't know. My brain.
Dads that call me all the time and say, I thought that I could get my kids and and I'm like, no, I signed the birth certificate. Doesn't matter.
What do you mean get your kids?
Get my, like, they just want to see them.
No, I'm not even talking about that. I'm only talking about the money, right? I'm talking about when I'm alive, the kids have access to my money, my income automatically, right?
But wait, because the money part is not the only important part in this conversation.
Right now, I'm only talking about the money part because it's just an aspect that men focus on, right? It's just an aspect because oftentimes when a man gets divorced, he goes from living in a beautiful house with his wife and his kids to now she's living in a beautiful house with the kids and he's living in an apartment in somebody's couch. That's just, those things happen, right? those things happen, right? I'm just saying. Those things happen. So that's what goes through a man's head when if he's having the commitment issues, because those are the things he's concerned about versus.
But that's the problem though, Jeff. And that's why I say you keep focusing on the money, but the marriage aspect doesn't just include the monetary portion, right? So when a man is deciding to get married, if you're not ready to be able to take care of your children, right, as a whole, and not just monetarily, but like take care of your family. Be involved in it. And you don't need to get married. But that's another reason why you shouldn't also in Georgia be having children outside of wedlock. Because if you are, you don't have any legal right to them. So you might have to pay child support for them because that's the only thing that the court can make you do. But until the court grants you the legal right to them, you can't even see them if the mom doesn't want you to.
No, I mean that goes without saying, right? That goes without saying until you get married. In terms of like this conversation, right? So yes, if you get married, you can see your kids, but the moment you get married, if you get divorced, you don't see your kids. Either way,
that doesn't happen in a marriage. That doesn't happen in a divorce. I'm talking about the legitimation.
So what about when you get divorced? Do you still have to fight to see your kids since you're not married?
The judge is going to order that, right? It'll either be a joint custody schedule between the two, depending on how involved dad is in the children's lives, right? So if mom is the primary parent in the marriage, mom is going to be a primary parent when the divorce comes around, right? So that's why it's important for dads to be just as involved in rearing their children as moms are, because the dads end up saying, oh, well, I don't have any benefit from marriage. She took all my money. She took my kids. And, well, sir, what were you doing with the kids beforehand? Were you going to the PTA meetings? No. Were you helping them with homework? No. How often were you spending time with them? Oh, well, I was working from 10 to 11 at night. Well, I mean,
but let me ask you a question though. And this is the part that is just conflicting to me, right? Because if we're conditioned and the expectations for the man to take care of the family, especially financially, if that's like still the ongoing expectation, even till in this progressive time, like a lot of women seek men who are able to have the means to take care of themselves and their family. But in order to do that, it requires them to work more, work hours, travel to get the bag, however you want to call it, because I do that, right? So the thing is that creates this loop. It's like you are this person that has this responsibility, but yet the court doesn't recognize that as what you did to sacrifice in order to provide a lifestyle for your family. But when it's time to see your kids, they use it against you because you're saying he wasn't at the PTA meetings, he wasn't at the, basketball practices and so on and so forth. But if it's
because at that point, it's not about you, it's about the stability of the children, right? When a court is deciding custody, we don't do it based on, I know it's a lot of nuances. When the court is deciding custody, we don't do it based on the parents' wants and needs. It's a best interest of the child standard, right? So if I've got two kids who mom is a primary parent, dad is always on the road, doesn't spend that much time with them, I'm not going to give dad primary physical custody of those children because essentially dad doesn't know them. I get it, dad. You were out here grinding and hustling, but if I'm doing what's in the best interest of the kids, I would be uprooting what their normal life is like. And the judge's job in a custody battle is to establish as much normalcy and stability for those children during a divorce. It's not about you and mama's feelings, right? It's about the children. So if the kids are used to mom being the primary parent and dad.
Yeah, but what's healthy for the kids though? Just the mom being the primary person or having like both influence? Because there's been a lot of trauma in child rearing where there's single parenthood, where they're not getting the balance of both parents. So whether or not, they look at the father as the person that wasn't spending the kind of time with the child, obviously because he's working and doing whatever, and obviously he would come home and hopefully he'd spend some time with the child, but to make it even more difficult for him to spend time with the kid, does that really benefit the kid if the kid's not seeing their father, right? The
judge isn't excluding a dad from seeing the father. The judge is just saying that you're not going to be the primary parent if you were not primary parent or at least an equal parent in the marriage, because the kids are not used to that. I don't know any judges that have said you cannot see these children ever, sir.
No,
Goodbye.
It's not about that. It's just, I have, okay, here's the deal. I have friends, right? I have friends who, I'm not going to name any names, but if they listen to this, don't know who they are, right? I have friends who either got separated or they're no longer with the person that they had kids with, right? And they had to do the whole custody thing, right? And the guy was the breadwinner in the relationship, right? The guy was the breadwinner in the relationship, and obviously he had to pay child support, right? But they get split custody. Okay?
They get week on, week off, like joint custody.
Yeah, joint custody, right? But like they're getting joint custody, but he's still paying child support. So whatever he spends on his kid while they're together at his place, taking the kid to do this, taking the kid to do that, so on and so forth, he's still spending money on top of child support, right? So none of that gets credited as anything. Versus if the mom has it, and because she's not the breadwinner, everything that she does with the kid all comes from the dad, right? So my thing is like, if you're
the mom not, what do you mean everything she does with the kid?
She doesn't earn that much money. She doesn't earn that much money, right? So because she's
living off of child support.
Excuse me?
So she's essentially living off of the child support amount?
I'm not saying she's living off of the child support, but because he makes more money, the money from child support comes from him.
Okay.
Right? So my thing is, when whatever she is doing with the child, when she has the kid, the money being used to take care of the child is mostly coming from child support.
How do you know that? How does he know that?
What do you mean? How does it? Because
does she not work? I'm confused.
She just doesn't make that much money. She makes some money, but the majority of the money that is provided to take care of the kid comes from the father. That's just
okay. So I think this is why I get confused, right? Because so child support is a calculation. It's literally a worksheet, and I put in what your income is, I put in what her income is, and then it comes up with pro rata shares of a number, right? So based on your income and her income, there's a total number that it would cost to raise this child or children or whatever.
Right.
And this is your household income.
Okay.
Right. So when you're in a marriage, this is what your household income looks like. This is how much money it costs to take care of these children every single month. Y'all don't realize it, but that's what it is.
Yes.
When you split up, now I have to determine the shares, right? Because mom's portion is still the same here. And if mom is the primary custodial parent, she's going to take the brunt of this because she's raising the child primarily throughout the child's lifetime, right? So then dad's portion of this, the numbers are going to teeter and totter, right? Because dad is the non-custodial parent. So that's where the child support number comes from, right? Usually, the child support number is not that large on dad's side that it's going to be able to take care of the child in its entirety on mom's side, because essentially feeding the child, clothing the child, lights, water, bills, and everything else, that's the household expense that the court is taking into account. But we're removing dad from that situation, right? And dad is now just paying a portion of what that household expense is. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, but if the mom doesn't make that much money, that's a pretty big portion, right?
It can be,
right.
But that's where my question to you is about joint custody, right? Because if they're sharing joint custody week on, week off, and there is still a large gap between the income, the court will still order some sort of child support, but it's not going to be such a large amount of child support that mom is able to live off of it. Now, unless we're talking about a guy that's loaded, right? Then mom should not be able to live off of $1,000 a month every single month full time. Some people can, I don't know.
Some people they'll make that money work, but I'm more concerned about the fact that, like, if a guy is spending time with his kid, that doesn't necessarily change how much he's paying if he's already spending time with his kids and spending money on the kid directly. All in all, there seems to be a lot of like unknown things and confusion, at least on men's end and my end, about child support. So I'm just going to agree to disagree and accept that there might be a lot of things that I don't know, and the things that I do know don't really incentivize me or a lot of men to be like, yeah, this is for me, right? So clearly there's a lot of things that need to be discussed, but marriage by itself, right? There's a lot of laws when it comes to marriage that were generated for civilizations prior to us, but still exist today. Like, what are some of the laws that exist in the legal system when it comes to marriage that you personally feel is outdated or doesn't really conform to what is going on today?
Well, I think that don't really conform. I think a lot of the old laws that didn't really make sense with marriage have, for the most part, been reevaluated. I think a lot of people don't know that adultery is a crime in a lot of states, right? It can be
hold up
punished for that, and I don't know why it's still law. One, because as attorneys we never actually seek it, right? It's criminal punishment for adultery, but
criminal punishment, like you go to jail.
You go to jail.
There's states where you can go to jail for adultery. You
can, if a woman is scorned enough and can prove it, right, criminally through that standard, you can pursue an action against your spouse for adultery, a criminal action against your spouse. However, I mean, that's a law that really needs to be taken off the books, because like what? And people don't actually do that. So, yeah.
Wait, what states is this? So I know what.
Georgia has it. New York has one.
New York has one?
Yeah.
I'm moving.
Oh, yeah. We're in the Bible Belt. So, we got all kind of stuff.
New York is not in the Bible Belt.
No. We are in the Bible Belt.
You are.
So, of course, Georgia has it. I live in Atlanta. Yeah. But New York is one. Yes.
I gotta Google this because I can't just sit here and take. I'm not, because I need to see how far this goes. Which states adultery illegal? Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Illinois, Kansas, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, New York, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Carolina. You basically the whole damn. Yo, listen, this is okay. All right. So hold up. Let me get this straight. So you mean to tell me? See, this further reinforces why men probably freak out with marriage, right? Because it's like not that okay. I'm not expecting. Can I finish though? Can I finish my thought? I just want to speak to the people and just like kind of speak my mind and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Oh, okay. So what I'm saying is like there's certain urges that people have that people are still struggling with just naturally, right? So if you really think about it, I'm not condoning adultery or infidelity or whatever it is, right?
But aren't you?
No, I'm not because in my mind it's like don't bring in any additional distractions that your relationship can't handle. Like that's just I'm not condoning that. But what I'm saying is it's still a factor in people trying to maintain their relationships. Like it's not a new thing that people struggle to maintain fidelity in their relationship. But when there's a criminal punishment to it, I don't even know if a lot of people even know this, but if you add that to the mix, right? I feel like you're just further diminishing whatever potential upsides there could have been for people to be married if you could be criminalized for something that is a natural urge that people have had for centuries, right? I mean, not for centuries, thousands of years, millions of years of that, right? So that's one of the laws you're saying is outdated, right?
Completely outdated. Should be just taken off the books and eliminated altogether. But I mean, like I said, you don't see many people bringing criminal actions. One, because it's a hard standard to prove. Most people don't have pictures of their spouse cheating on them, right? Like, I mean,
investigators exist.
Act, right? You don't usually find out. People do find out, and then they don't have the time to take pictures because they're probably tearing the house up, right? But it's hard to prove. So, I feel like that's a part of the reason why, you don't really pursue a criminal action for adultery, but it is on the books. It is extremely outdated. And as you saw, it is a Class B misdemeanor in the state of New York. You can get up to 3 months in jail time, I believe, for it. So, yep.
They better be worth it.
You can drop a clues bomb on that one. It better be worth it.
Damn, yo, this is crazy. But you also I remember you mentioned something about like common law marriage also. So what are your thoughts on that and how does that work? And what are some things that people don't know about it? And how do you feel about its relevancy in today's environment?
Well, a lot of people think that common law marriage is still a thing in most states. And in many states, it's been eliminated, right? In Georgia, it was eliminated. We tested my knowledge of the law. Oh, I remember the date. It's been a lot of years in Georgia.
A long time ago. Once upon a time.
Right. Common law used to be a thing. So a lot of people will call me and say, hey, we've been together for 7 years. We held ourselves out to the public as married and blah, 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 right? And because of that, we should still be considered common law married. And I'm like, well, when did this relationship start? Because if it started after the date of, and let me find out now so I can actually reference this. But if it started after the date that common law marriage was no longer recognized, you don't have nothing but a relationship, baby girl.
Right, but if it started before.
Right, it will be recognized if it was before the date that it was, the law was repealed.
Also depending on the state that your marriage was like recognized.
And depending on the state, right? Now, there are some states that do still recognize it. January 1st, 1997. There we go. So if you had a relationship that began after 97, no common law marriage. But if you have a relationship that began before January 1st, 1997, and it meets the elements of common law marriage.
Which is what?
Then Jesus, you really tested my
You got to own a cat together.
You have to be married. You have to. I think it's 7 years. You have to hold yourself out to the public as like husband and wife, meaning like
Facebook friends.
No.
You have to follow each other. That's why the ladies want to be followed. You have to follow him online. He never followed you, girl, so he don't follow back.
I'm married. But it's like it's literally like people in the neighborhood, right, or in the community know
witnesses,
husband and wife, right?
Right.
And a whole host of other factors that you have to meet, but you can't just pop up and be like, we common law married, because if ain't nobody know y'all was together, or you walking around saying I'm Miss Dixon and he's saying he's Mr. Damisse, then who are y'all? Y'all just go together. That's not a marriage.
I be like, look at us, we cute together though, right?
Yeah.
No? All right, fuck it. Okay, so common law marriages is something that you're saying is outdated and doesn't really function.
It was recognized, but is no longer a thing in a lot of different states. And I think that people have not caught up with that, right? Because I still have people now that ask me about being common law married. And I'll tell them here in this state, absolutely not. Common law marriage is no longer a thing.
But the states where it does exist, do you feel like it has relevancy or it needs to be gone too?
I think it needs to be gone, because why? Why didn't you just get married? Right? It's a harder process. You got to go to the court, then you got to prove all these factors existed, and you got to do this and do that. You could have just got the marriage certificate. And then if the court still does not recognize your marriage as common law, you're in the same boat that you were in. So you spent all that time with that person, right? And you have no legal benefit to that person's death, because not legal benefit to their death. That sounds bad when you say it, but like you're not going to be taken care of, even if they wanted you to be, because the court did not recognize your marriage if you didn't meet those factors.
What about like, what about some of the cases that you've dealt with? Like obviously keeping people's names anonymous. Like what's some of the craziest like legal exchanges you've had to deal with as a lawyer when it comes to marriage? Like what's the most, either the funniest or the most outrageous disputes that you've ever had to encounter?
The worst one, and it wasn't funny, but it was filled with so much juicy gossip.
Okay.
Because it was a few years ago, and I had a client who was married, and her husband had an ex-wife. There was a custody battle going on between her husband and his ex-wife.
Okay.
They had hired a lawyer, the husband and wife,
okay,
to handle that custody battle.
Okay.
The husband then began cheating on his current wife with his lawyer that he had hired for his custody battle.
What? That's a whole movie.
It's a whole thing.
You understand me? So, okay, I want to make sure I'm understanding this right. So, a guy hires a lawyer to handle his divorce,
his custody issue.
Oh, his custody issue.
That's a custody action. He was happily married to woman over here. He was no longer married to woman over here. Right? I'm sorry. So so a guy had an ex-wife and a current wife. Right.
He had children with the ex-wife, and he's currently in dispute with, or at least in the negotiation process of child support.
Changing custody.
Custody. Okay, so disputing custody.
They had already been divorced. Child support was established. Custody was established, right? He moves on. He gets remarried.
Yeah.
Well, he wants to change custody with the children from the ex-wife. Okay. Fine. Cool.
Yeah.
Husband, current wife, go find a lawyer to handle the custody case for the children from the last marriage.
Yeah.
He starts cheating.
Of course.
With a lawyer, just that case. And now current wife is getting a divorce from him.
Is he using the same lawyer?
Of course he wasn't. He comes to me and us because I was working at she comes to me and us because I was working at a different firm at the time. And now it's a mess, right? Because current wife is blasting the lawyer all over the internet, reported it to the bar, putting out blogs on it. It was a whole thing, right? So now we as attorneys have to bring in, because now we've got an adultery claim within our divorce, right?
Yeah.
And mind you, the custody thing is still going on in
still
his
pending. Because that's got to get handled.
Oh,
I would just, oof.
So it's a mess. So now I've got to call the lawyer up as a deposition. I'm looking for the receipts to the hotels and everything else. And it was just a mess.
How did they get caught?
Oh, now you know what? I don't even remember how they got caught. I think I was so focused on the fact that it was like the lawyer that I was like, holy crap, she was messing with her client. I was in shock.
I would almost imagine that they were at like a courtroom or like some type of like, you know, like meeting or something, and all the parties were there and somebody got caught playing footsies. That's what I'm picturing. You know what I mean? Because then they start like looking at tweets, like checking phones, all that. Oh man, that is.
I wish I remembered how they got caught, because that is a pertinent part of that. But I don't. I just remember being like, oh, the lawyer. And I was like, oh, this is so messy. And it was so much gossip and it was a mess.
I would laugh if like he got the lawyer pregnant and then there were kids that like grew up under that and they're like, oh, daddy, how did you meet mommy?
Right.
Well,
the lawyer got hired from her firm. She had to go like start her own firm. It was a whole thing.
Yeah, you think? I mean,
my client filed a bar complaint against her. It was like a thing.
That's crazy.
It was the messiest. It was so messy. I think that was probably the messiest one.
Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy it? Was it like entertaining for you?
I think I was more. It was super messy, but I think I was more in shock. Right? I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe that you would. And then it's not like you're a criminal lawyer, right? Or you're a PI lawyer. Like, you are a family lawyer. You know, like, this is what we do for a living.
Wow.
Why would you want to be wrapped up in someone's divorce case as an attorney of record for your client? And now you are also the party who, you know, did the deed and caused the divorce.
Listen, somebody in there was fine as hell. That's just what it was. Okay. Somebody in there, like, if you're showing up and your lawyer is fine as hell, or if the lawyer shows up and the man is fine as hell in whatever capacity, hormones are kicking. I'm just picturing it. I'm just like, this is a whole movie. You gotta write. Huh?
Ain't that much fun in the world, baby. That's gonna make me lose my job and tarnish my reputation.
Listen, no, come on. You met me. You see what's up. Anyway, I'm going to hell. So no, I think that's a fascinating story, and it just kind of further speaks to the point of like, regardless of like how marriages are put together, people are the ones that are affecting the relationship. Marriage is just a tool, vehicle to like manage assets and rights, more than it is something that like dictates the value of your relationship. Right. And I think that's my takeaway from this conversation, because ultimately a lot of people might see it differently. Right. That's
why I said, like, I always say to people, don't get married if it doesn't make sense on paper. Yeah. Right. In my opinion, if everybody's broke, then fine, get married, whatever, it doesn't matter. If one person, you know, because like, what do you have to lose?
Okay. Really? So you're saying broke people are the only ones that should be getting married? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if everyone is broke, then you ain't got nothing to lose. Why not? Get married for love and everything else, right? And you can probably build within that, but also understand that during that building process, you are married. So everybody's going to have entitlement to something, right? Legally. Yeah. It's when you have people who have significant assets, right? One person may have more than the other. When this starts happening, or even you guys are on the same level financially, that marriage can become a little more complicated, right? And that's where I start telling people, you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I know that we have this grandiose idea of marriage being this beautiful union, which it is, and this spiritual connection, which it is, and this religious bond, which it is, for some people, but also understand it's a financial contract. And you're not going to enter into a contract when it doesn't make sense, right? So let's sit down and talk about a prenuptial agreement. What does that look like? What should be in it? Yeah.
what clauses do I want as a woman? Because there are different things that men and women should both ask for in prenups, right?
Yeah.
As a woman, these are the clauses that I would like in it to protect myself in case things like adultery happen or this happens, or I become a stay-at-home mom, right? And I need some sort of alimony claim or I lose my skill. If I am a man and I have interest in businesses with other partners, or I make this amount of money or whatever, there needs to be some sort of constraint around what happens to my assets if we separate, right? But people don't want to have that conversation because it directly conflicts with the fact that we're getting married for love.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's nice. But you're also entering into a legally binding contract. And just like we walk around with insurance, right? You don't intend to crash your car when you go outside, but you have insurance on your car, right? You don't intend to have a heart attack, but you have health insurance. Some of us, not everybody has health insurance. I don't want to talk about that because it makes me upset. But anyway, so why not do your due diligence before you get married, especially if you have something to lose. If there's a risk for you, which men fear, sit down and have the conversation about, these are what my assets look like. This is what I'm comfortable with, and this is what I'm not comfortable with, and have that conversation. It doesn't mean the person loves you any less. It just means you're being smart about your partnership. So
you're pro prenup, obviously.
Absolutely.
So for prenups, does the whole concept of accustomed to a certain lifestyle go away if it's not written in the prenup?
What do you mean?
So you know how like certain like marriages end in divorce, and the dispute is how much alimony is given out. So if the partner who makes less was accustomed to a certain lifestyle, then they're awarded or afforded a certain amount of like alimony based on that lifestyle that they need to maintain.
It doesn't go away completely because it depends on what's fair. The judge is still going to try to do what's fair, right? So if the prenup at the time y'all have, who can we use an example? Jeff Bezos, right? Let's use that. Amazon started out in a closet, let's say, right? And that was that. If they had a prenuptial agreement that said based on this lifestyle, blah, 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 blah. Well, this man is worth billions of dollars. Is it billions? Does he have billions?
Yeah, he's like the richest man in the world, even though after his divorce, he's like $100 billion.
Billions. I was like, who is it? Is it still Bill Gates? I don't know. Jeff Bezos, billions of dollars. A prenuptial agreement in that divorce.
$191 billion.
It don't even make no sense. Don't even make no sense. Can't even do nothing with it. But anyway, he's got billions of dollars now, right?
How is this a thing?
A prenuptial agreement back then, when Amazon was in a closet, it won't be fair at that point, right? To say, oh, well, you should just only be accustomed to the lifestyle that you agreed to at the time of the prenup. A judge is still going to try and do what's fair and what's right, but there will be constraints around that. There's more protection around it when you have a prenuptial agreement.
All right. In the prenup, I'm going to write what I'm accustomed to, my lifestyle. I'm going to be like, I'm accustomed to getting my feet rubbed.
Uh-huh.
I'm accustomed to having sandwiches made.
What kind of sandwiches? Peanut butter or turkey?
Yes. No crust. Listen, I understand your point, though. You make a valid point, and I want to take this time to appreciate the fact that you came in and had this conversation very candidly, and like, you're so professional, you're wonderful, you're beautiful, you're doing your thing, and I'm very appreciative of like people who are taking on these roles and are educated about it so they can represent the public properly. Do you have like any way for people to reach you if they want like your services, or they want to ask you questions, or if you have any programs coming up that people can participate in? Absolutely. So my Instagram is Breakup Lawyer, @BreakupLawyer. My handle is the same, Facebook, Twitter, @Breakup Lawyer. I am ready to have a event on November the 7th. It's my brand launch. So I would love for anyone who can't pull up to the A to come out and celebrate. Thank you. And definitely follow me on Instagram. I drop, my first one will actually be on Monday, but I drop weekly snippets every week, Monday and Wednesday. It'll be of topics like this, right? So what should men include in a prenup, and what should women include in a prenup? It'll only be about 60 seconds, but it'll help people become a little more knowledgeable about, what they can do in their relationships to safeguard themselves before, during, and after a marriage. Right on. I appreciate that. And you guys can find me at j.damisse on IG and j_DAMISSE on Twitter. The Introspect Club can be found on Introspect_Club for, either Clubhouse, IG, Twitter, YouTube, you name it. You guys can find it on there. Stay tuned for the next episode. And I appreciate, everyone who's listening in. And thank you for your participation. Brittany,
Of course.
you're wonderful.
Thank you.
Until next time, love.
Okay, have a good one.
You too.